So is anybody here consider themselves new to Tantra? You don't?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I should say a few words about what Tantra is. Wow, which words? I mean, there's so many aspects to it, and so many. I mean, virtually all of life is part of Tantra, really, and all of life can be about Tantra if you approach it that way. But Tantra is a spiritual path that is one of the oldest continually practiced spiritual paths on the planet. We don't really know, it's really hard to say when it started because it grew and evolved and absorbed so many influences. And it still does that, really, to some extent. But it arose, probably most accurate to say it arose in the jungles of what is now India. And among the Dravidian people who are dark-skinned people who inhabited most of the Indian subcontinent until the Aryans came from the northwest and swept into India, one of many waves of conquerors and people from other areas coming into India. But it was a particularly important one. And they brought their own spirituality, but it was more orthodox. It had a sort of sense of orthodoxy about it. It wasn't. It was much more codified and that wave of influence gave rise to the Vedas, which are considered one if not the most ancient spiritual scriptures. Though they weren't scriptures at that point, they were. And really, until very recently, they weren't scriptures. They were passed on orally, and so the Vedas are a lot about ritual and observances and mantras and so forth. But there are the Yajurveda and I'm not remembering all the names. There are 4 major ones. But that's Orthodox Hinduism, really, or kind of Vedic Hinduism, if you want to think about it that way. But Tantra was really indigenous to India when that tradition came. And so, though the Dravidians were pushed to the south by the invaders, the Vedic priests began to realize that the Dravidians had a lot of knowledge, but not of the more formal type. So they set about making connection with them and going into the jungle and learning from the rishis of the jungle. And that was where the tradition of Tantra began to take shape, or a shape more like what we would recognize today. It also absorbed a lot of influences from the indigenous tribes of India, not just the Dravidians themselves, but other tribes. And so India has, I don't know, maybe 50 million, 30 million, 50 million indigenous people that were there before what we think of as India came into being. And they have their own languages and their own spirituality, and a lot of their spirituality is more like what we would think of as what's the word I'm looking for?
Shamanism, or maybe shamanism?
Shamanism, shamanic, yeah. And that there's strong shamanic influences in Tantra, and so the result of all that absorbing created many different schools of Tantra and many different versions, which is still true. And so while the Vedas were really the scriptures or the teachings that were guiding Orthodox Hinduism, Vedic Hinduism, Tantra had no such agreement. There was no standard teachings. And so there are many scriptures written, many of them not in Sanskrit or Hindi or any of the modern English Indian languages, but in older Indian languages or local Indian languages. And so there are thousands, literally, of scriptures and manuscripts that some were not translated, have never been translated. And some of them actually, I'm sorry to say, the University of Allahabad, who had many of these, were actually just threw them away because they, well, who knows these languages? And so that's a great loss. But so Tantra then has no dogma. It's not a religion. It doesn't even have a kind of code of what is the right way to live. Because there's so many different versions, and who could agree? So it does not equate to like Christianity or even Hinduism, which is very free form and really doesn't really have much in the way of dogma either. You can't say a creed and that's what Hindus believe, So it's spirituality. India is a country of spiritualities, but it's also a country of some religions. Some religions originated there, like Buddhism and like my mind is not working well tonight, but who are the ones that sweep up the insects so they don't inhale them? The
Jane?
no, not Sikhs. Sikhs are a religion, and that
The Jains, though, I think.
Jains.
Yeah.
Jains, yeah. But the Sikhs are kind of amalgamation of Hinduism and Islam. And then they're also Sufis. I think the origination of Sufism was in the Middle East more, but certainly it's very prominent in India. So, but of all these different spiritual traditions that have developed and been nurtured in India, the one that's the least codified and the most difficult to define, really, is Tantra. And so, that's why we came up with the principles. We don't have a thing, banner. That kind of trying to tease out some of the common principles. Principles meaning like ways of approaching the practice. So there are guides to how do you approach the practice, but there's no right way and wrong way. So the things that we pulled out were, well, there is the concept in Tantra, almost universally, that everything is an experiment. And you may not do it as an experiment, but if you are Tantrika, everything you do is done as an experiment. I didn't really understand that at first, and when my teacher helped me find a partner, a wife, so I could have children, we could have children. I was very reluctant because I thought, well, that's not really my direction. I really feel more drawn to men than women. Though I had, relationships with women and girlfriends and blah, 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 but that was not what really drew me. So he helped me meet this young lady, and he helped make sure that we spent time together, and then, I became smitten. But then when time came to kind of, well, aren't you going to get married? And then I got cold feet, like, I don't know. And then he said, do it as an experiment. And I went, what? What is, oh my God, he's nuts. What do you mean? I didn't say that, but later, after I was married, we had 4 children, got divorced, and I looked back and I thought, wow, that was probably the grandest experiment of my life. And I'm still gathering data from that experiment. When they did the China study on nutrition in China, Cornell University did, it took them, they gathered all this data, and now it's taken like 15 years to kind of really analyze the data. Because so much information. Well, that's how much information I got. It's been 20 years since I got divorced. Actually, 25 maybe. So I finally came to realize, well, that's the tantric way, that everything is an experiment. I mean, if you're a tantrika, everything is an experiment. You don't have to do it that way, but then you won't be a tantrika. So that's one of the principles that seems to keep it up, make it all hang together, all these different schools of Tantra. And then there's certainly a great teaching about that pervades Tantra about the marriage between the masculine and feminine in each person. And I think that's one of the distinguishing characteristics of Tantra. And again, I know that coming to the West, certainly California, the emphasis on that really waned and kind of faded. And so the concept there is more that, well, Tantra is about the relationship between a man and woman. Well, that's a vast difference between those two ideas. Most of us can relate to that. But that's often called Neo-Tantra. Neo-Tantra meaning that, well, we're branching out, we're creating our own thing. And there's no rules, there's no diploma, there's no you can do anything and call it Tantra. And so people are doing a lot of things that they call Tantra that I wouldn't call Tantra, but that's up to them. So yeah, so the intermarriage, the marriage between Shiva and Shakti, is a very central feature of Tantra. And that's not dogma, that's just an observance that, well, you have a right nostril and a left nostril. Why don't you just have one hole? I mean, there must be some reason. Do you know? Does anybody know why? Well, you guys know, right?
Yeah.
All right, you say so that because my voice can rest.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you're I think the simple version is that the right nostril is the divine masculine, this is Shiva, and the left nostril is the divine feminine, Shakti, and so the right nostril corresponds to the left brain, and the left nostril corresponds to the right brain. And then there's quite a on a biological level, there's a lot of, or do you call them nerves, or what do you call it? They're erectile tissue.
Receptors.
Receptors.
Oh yeah, there are receptors in there, and then there's also the erectile tissue, which only found in two other places in the body, the nipple and the penis or clitoris. But there's erectile tissue, and it is constantly shrinking and swelling at about a rate of 2 to 4 hours. And that directs the flow of air through one nostril or the other. And so there are periods of the day when we're dominated by left hemisphere and periods of the day when we're dominated by right hemisphere. And that goes on through the night as well. So we are constantly being her, and then we're being him. But the funny thing is, when I become her, I have amnesia for being him. And when I become him, I have amnesia for being her. So it's very hard for us to, it's a split. It's a schism. It's a schizophrenia. So the yogis say, now I'm speaking yoga language more than Tantra, but Tantra uses a lot of yoga. And yoga uses a lot of tantra. All the chakra concepts come from tantra. But the yogis say that, you know, if you want to be aware of both of them, then you have to equalize the nostrils, and that is called...
Nadi Shodhana? Nadi Shodhana?
No, it's called Sushumna. Nadi Shodhanam is the exercise.
Oh, the
to do
exercise
go
to
back and
do it. Yeah.
But opening the central channel is called Sushumna. And then you are aware of both. But we've spent very little time in Sushumna because we get to this point, okay, it's equal now, there it goes, it's not equal anymore. And there's a Sushumna time at dusk and dawn when the night is right there. That's a very good time to meditate. Because if you want to meditate, you need to open Sushumna. If your nostrils aren't equal, you can sit and you can maybe contemplate, but you can't really go into deep meditation. And so we have this dilemma, and this is part of a major teaching in Tantra. We have this dilemma that until we can bring together Shiva and Shakti, the right and the left, and Ida and Pingala channels, until we can bring them together, we can't get past this chakra. So if you want to go up here, then they have to come together in a more stable marriage. So that's a major teaching in Tantra. It's not a belief, it's an observation. You know, you can observe it. So there's also another teaching, another principle, and that is very universal in Tantra and a lot of Indian spirituality. Not talked about so much in yoga, but certainly in the Upanishads. And that is that we live in different worlds. There's this world, everyday waking consciousness, called Vishvarana. This is but then we go to sleep, or we lie down, and we go into a dream state. And there's another kind of split there, because when we go into dream state, we mostly don't remember the dreams. So we've split that off. That's another split. Another kind of amnesia, morning amnesia. Oh, did you dream? Oh, no, I didn't dream. Well, you did, but you can't remember it. So the yogis go after these splits and kind of dig into them, aren't willing to accept them. Like our psychologist, Freud, said, well, the unconscious can never be conscious. You can't go there. You can infer the unconscious through psychoanalysis by kind of listening to dream things and putting the pieces together and kind of guessing what happens in dream consciousness or in the unconscious, on all levels of the unconscious. But you can't be directly aware of it because it's unconscious. But the yogis say, no, you can learn to go there. You can be conscious of everything. And So that means we go from Vishvarana to Taijasa, which is the world of dreams and dream imagery and so forth. And then there's another one beyond that is called Prajna, which means literally the first knowing, which is not about images, not about words, not about any of that, but it's a deeper knowing. And then beyond that, what you would call the magic structure of consciousness. And that's what I mean. Come on, water bottle. Forgot I had it. And so the fourth state is called Turiya, which translates as the fourth state. That's all it means. But the interesting thing about the fourth state is that it can only come into being by holding the first three transparently all at once. So not only being aware of now and being aware of the dream, but being aware of the dreamless states all at the same time. And time is not an appropriate word to use because some of those don't have time. Time doesn't function there. So we can say holding all three transparently. So they're like, we used to have transparencies that we would show on a screen. And sometimes you would forget and put up 2 or 3, and then you have this jumble. Well, that's what it looks like when you're in that fourth state, that I can see you, I can see all the stories around that you have and I have about in the dream world. And then I can see the dreamless sleep stuff, the energy flow, and the aura, and all the things that are going on, all like layered. There it is, all there. And that I can see that in other other zones of time and space. So we call that in English, we call that, enlightenment or cosmic consciousness or something. We have different words. But that's a principle in Tantra, because Tantra is a multi-dimensional discipline. So people are doing rituals, it's not just the ritual, the energy of it is apparent and palpable. And all the archetypes that make up that Taijasa are present and visible. Not invisible, but visible. So that's part of being a Tantrika. So, what have I left out?
Plenty.
Well, as far as principles of Tantra.
Ascending and descending energies, multiple realities, chakras. You want to speak out? Ascending and descending energies.
I couldn't.
Ascending and descending
Yeah.
energies.
Ascending and descending currents, yeah. So a key teaching in Tantra is about key. When I say teaching, it's not a teaching out there, it's a teaching in here. You know, like it's happening inside of you. So it's really an observation. But you have to observe it, which means you have to expand your awareness, self-awareness. And that's really the key. You can't just be aware of stuff out there. You got to be aware of what's going on in here if you're going to do Tantra. So you become aware that there's energy that is down here and that it can move through you. Depending on how you position your spine. That's why I'm sitting this way and you're sitting that way. Because you want to enable that subtle energy to move up through from down in the pelvis up through your spine and through all parts of your body and through here and through to activate the different chakras. That's the idea. You can activate this chakra, which is about mastery and domination and submission and things like that, or this chakra, which is about connection and but also about this, this heart chakra, and this chakra that's about speaking, which I'm having trouble doing, and creating, and then this chakra, so that we can begin to experience the intermarriage between the polarities, and we can begin to see beyond the everyday world and on up, because there are other chakras here, and so forth. So we say that the energy that's sequestered in the pelvis is called Shakti, but it's a special aspect of Shakti called Kundalini Shakti. And that Kundalini, Kunda means there's a bowl, and Lini means the serpent. So there's a serpent in the bowl, and that serpent is dormant, asleep. But when it wakes up, it can go like that. And then you come to life. More alive. So that's something also you can observe, and you may not observe it, and it doesn't always happen one mind-blowing event. No, it happens in increments usually. But you can feel increments of that aliveness and moving up your spine and awakening more awareness and awakening more sensitivity and more awareness of other dimensions and so forth. Oh, and then there's the one that got added for Westerners, which is the healing power of pleasure. And we only needed that because we were taught that pleasure's bad. So this is a remedial step for Westerners.
Well, it sounds like for Catholics.
Well, of course, we're all Catholic. I mean, Catholic means Christian tradition, really. I mean, originally it meant Catholic. But yes, in all of Christianity, not all of Christ's teachings, but in all of Christianity, that is a present. Well, my teacher called it churchianity. Yeah, he said, I don't like churchianity. He said, I follow Christianity, but not churchianity. So we have to learn to not be guilty about pleasure and not to be ashamed that we want pleasure. And so that's for Westerners, that principle, that part of Tantra. In India, in general, though there are many, many traditions and customs and languages and spiritualities and you name it, cuisine in India, but by and large, children are raised to enjoy being in their bodies. And one manifestation of that is that in most of the Indian cultures, when a child's born, the mother will give that child massage every day, all parts of the body, doesn't leave out anything. No, all this feels good and it's yours and you should enjoy it. And that child grows up that way. And not that they don't have psychological problems, but not this thing of, well, everything from here down is like, no. That really, Indians find that really bizarre. They do. I don't think you've read Yoga Boga and Ardhanarishvara.
We read some out of it.
Friend
For our
Sarang.
very- for our very first module.
What about it?
We read some of that for
Some.
our very first module of Ed. Yeah.
Because he grew up in, author grew up in Kerala. And then he sent to a Catholic school. And he talks about all the things that they learned about. There was a man in the sky and how everything you did was bad. And, it was like really weird. But it didn't stick because he had spent the first 10 years of his life in a different tradition. So, so the healing power of pleasure. And why it's healing, there are many ways in which pleasure is healing. But the first for us is that it allows us to experience our body as one entity instead of fragments. So unless you feel pleasure from a part of your body, it's not part of you. And then it starts becoming painful. It's responsible for a lot of our physical problems. No, not that, and cut that off, cut that off, cut that off, cut that off. And I'm not aware of this, and so eventually I'm just a head with maybe a cock, I don't know, a few little things. But so many pieces of me have been eliminated, out of my awareness. So healing is making whole. Heal, whole, health, holy, all those words come from the same root. And in other languages too, Hailaga. So we have to overcome our self-imposed fragmentation to become tantrika, or becoming a tantrika for us. That people from the other side of the planet don't have as much trouble with as we do. So that's a little introduction to some of what Tantra is about. So with that in mind, are there things you're curious about or questions you have or anything you would like to bring up, discuss? Do that.
Well, tantric art to me always seems so heterosexual, the vagina and the penis, and I don't understand how gay men fit with tantra, since it historically for 1,000 years all the artwork of tantric sex is just the man and the woman. So to me, I always thought of it as kind of like a sacred pornography of heterosexuality, you know.
Yeah,
So-
except it wasn't a man and a woman. It was a god and a goddess
God and goddess, okay.
who live in, you know, in us. However, that literal interpretation is exactly what happened in Neo-Tantra in California. And, you know, like, yeah, see, look at the pictures.
Right, yeah.
We know how to look at pictures. You know,
Right.
pornography, you know, we understand. I see what they're doing. Will you do that? Yes, yeah, I'll do that. But that was not the intention. The intention was that it's Shiva and Shakti. And Shiva's here and Shakti's here. And, you know, we need for them to come together inside. So if you are actually thinking in Tantra terms, then life is not about a union between a man and a woman. I may have the experience of connecting as a man with a woman, but that is to help me learn to do that internally. That's the whole purpose of it.
Mhm.
That's why we go through the psychodrama of an external marriage, so that we will understand how to create the internal marriage. That's as seen through the eyes of a tantrika. So, you know, whether you decide to have sexual experiences with a man or a woman is irrelevant as long as you're applying what you learn from that experience to this inner merging, this inner coming together of two to become
And
one.
I didn't think Shiva's wife was Shakti. I thought his wife was the female and male, husband and wife. Was it Parvati?
Oh, well, so here's the funny thing about the representations of the deities,
Okay.
which are like archetypes. Shiva is Shiva. Now there is also Vishnu, and then there's Brahma, but actually most people in India are either Shaivites or Vishnuites. Vaishnava, I don't know how they say it, Vaishnavites. Because those are the two most popular gods. And then that becomes popular Hinduism, which is different from Tantra. Most Hindus will have one god or goddess that they are devoted to. And their customs are connected to their local deities, and it's rather provincial. But tantrikas aren't limiting themselves to, you know, in fact, there's the Mahavidyas that you saw in the temple, and you may have seen them there too. Did you see the, you know, Dancing Shiva?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are 10 goddesses, the Mahavidyas, they're called, the 10 great goddesses. But there's just Shiva, because she has many moods and many faces and many outfits and many ways of presenting herself to the world. But he's just him, you know. And so the goddess will have many versions. Though you might say Shakti is the generic goddess, perhaps.
Because it's an expression of energy, right? Shakti is a particular kind of energy.
Well,
It's sort of
that's what
generic energy.
all the goddesses are. See, the goddess is really a certain quality of energy. that runs through the universe and through us.
Yeah, I always thought Shakti was energy versus a person or a wife of Shiva. I guess I'm a little confused with Shakti as energy or Shakti as the other half of Shiva.
So the word Shakti in Sanskrit translates as power.
Power.
Power. That's how you say power. If you want to say
Shakti.
power, you say Shakti. So Shakti is power. Now that is a feminine noun. So it's understood in that culture, the Indian culture, that power is an aspect of the feminine. It's not an aspect of the masculine. People always ask me, well, what about masculine power? And I have to say, well, you're going to talk in tantric terms. There's no such thing. And they go, well, yeah, of course there is. I mean, strong guys, you know. But that's not power. You call it strength, maybe. So what is power? That brings up the question, what is power? And in Tantra we have to say, and in most spiritual traditions really, power is the ability to manifest, to bring something into manifestation.
You're good.
You need help?
Yeah, I just need to stand up.
Okay.
Oh, thanks.
And if you're being tortured sitting there, you can sit on the sofa.
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to torture you. I just want to hear what you're saying. So then, see, you got to get your head in a whole different place because the words don't mean the same thing, and the way of organizing the world is different. So it's only she, Shakti, only the feminine, which can bring into manifestation something that is totally unique, that has never existed. And the prototype for that is birthing a child. You know, every time she does it, there's never been one like this. Like, how could that be? You know, give a guy a factory and say, all right, start producing things that have never existed before. And, well, he can produce things, but they're always just a combination of this one and that one, or but can't come up with something that's totally unique. Unless he calls on his feminine creativity, which he's unlikely to do, because he's afraid someone will call him a fag. So that really makes it difficult. Yeah, so that's one of the great impediments to the intermarriage in the West, is homophobia. And I heard some guy say one time, some big hulking guy say, what do you mean connect with my feminine? I don't have one. I thought, it looks like you got two nostrils to me. Anyway. So, where were we? We were talking about Shakti and
power.
So you can say, so another way of using the term Shakti is the generic goddess, which means that you're back to the idea that it's power. It's all the different versions of power are Shakti. But there are different versions. So Shiva has had different consorts in the history of all the many stories of Shiva. And Parvati was a consort, but she was also a manifestation of Shiva, of Shakti. So it's said that every god has his Shakti. And men say that in India, where she's pointing to their wives instead of my wife, my Shakti. But that doesn't mean that it has to be out there. You know, out there, the Shakti out there in a marriage, a separate person as a female, is just this exercise we're doing while we're here on planet Earth. And not everybody's doing it. You know, like, I mean, you have, my masculine can have a relationship with your feminine, or vice versa. Or my masculine can have a relationship with your masculine. Or my feminine can have a relationship with your feminine. I mean, you know, all these things have only become possible in the last 50, 100 years. I mean, they were possible, but we never acknowledged it. So, I just marvel sometimes at how we get caught up in the psychodrama and think it's real. I mean, it's real in a way, but we think it's the reality.
The reality, yeah.
You know, that you're a woman, I'm a man. You know, get with it, woman. And, you know, it's like, I mean, one time my teacher said to all his students, which were men and women, a lot of them were married, some were single. He said, when will you people stop thinking of yourselves as men and women? And everybody just went, what does he mean?
I'll walk with you.
I would appreciate it.
So anyway, yeah, does that help with the Shakti?
It does. I think I'm coming from the frame where I study mythologies to do my artwork based on myths. I put archetypes in there. So this is a different way of looking at it energetically. So I think I'm drawing inspiration from Shaivism and those archetypes that I do my art based on my research. But what you're saying, I feel like my pieces of art are my children. So I think maybe that's how the feminine
Could you
comes
just slow it down a
to
little more,
me.
because I don't hear well and I can read your lips, but
I was saying that when I create art, even though it's inspired from religion and mythology in Hinduism,
yeah,
when I put my energy into a Kuan Yin or goddess in my artwork, I think that's me putting the feminine, and it's me birthing children because I've never had a biological child. But I think my art, they are my children, you know, so I think that's another feminine
right.
aspect. For me, it's how I connect with my feminine, you know, giving birth to art into the world, you know.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Does anybody know what time it is? We don't have.
It's about 9.
A little after 9. Little after 9.
9. Oh wow. What time did we start this part?
We started a little late,
7.
7 something, I don't know.
Did you order the pizza?
Time is an illusion, so
That's right.
I'm not bound to it.
Well, we have time for a couple more questions, but we'll start winding it down. Anybody have anything they would like to talk about?
Could you explain what tantric sex is? You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, very good question. So there are different versions, like, you know, I'm speaking from more orthodox, you know, what I want to say, authentic tantric traditions from India, not neo-tantra. Because I don't know that much about neo-tantra. I just know it doesn't appeal to me. So when you were talking about raising Kundalini, what gets her, what wakes her up? And as with in many situations with many beings, sex wakes her up. And she starts getting active and becoming aroused. And And we can use that sexual arousal then as a way of mobilizing energy that can move up and open all these other chakras. And that is, in a word, tantric sex. Because that-
Kundalini? Kundalini? Is that what the movement is? Kundalini? That it goes up
Kundalini,
through,
the Kundalini
from the root chakra up to the
rising,
crown chakra?
Kundalini rises.
Rising, okay, yeah.
Once she's awakened from her slumber.
Yeah.
But we have to awaken her from her sleep. And that means there a lot of the practices of yoga and Tantra are organized around waking her up. Now, what does that mean? That means that it's said she's drunk. She passed out down there between the first and second chakra. She fell asleep. She passed out because her energy, her Shakti, went not into rising up through the body, but into first chakra things like, okay, security. Well, I feel more secure if I go shopping. You know, I mean, what are they calling it now? Retail therapy.
Retail therapy, yeah.
Oh, really?
I mean,
Retail
really,
therapy.
when I read that phrase, I almost fell over laughing. Really? Shades of George Bush, who said, when 9/11 happened, he said, they hate our way of life. And my friend, Laurie, said, well, what is our way of life? Shopping? Well, sure enough, he said, go out and shop.
Oh my gosh.
That was his solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are all upset about 9/11. Go out and
Go
shop.
spend your money.
It's like, really? I mean, oh my God. We do need an infusion from other cultures. There's no
We do,
question
yeah.
about that. Anyway. Yeah. So yes, Kundalini. So that is the function of tantric sex, is to help raise that energy. But if too much of that energy is locked into consumerism, to making sure I'm safe, you know, fear of this and fear of that, then it's not available to move upward. So that's why we have to do our own inner work, which a lot of the stuff will come up in meditation and we can see it and let it go and gradually disentangle ourselves from it. And then she becomes more prepared to wake up, more easily awakened, and then that energy can move up through us. And so that is where sexuality and spirituality come together. They become one and the same. But you got to do the preparatory work. And that's why the Yoga Sutras, how many people have taken a yoga class? Did you hear of the Yoga Sutras? No, maybe not. But the Yoga Sutras begin with the yamas and niyamas. And those are the principles that help us disentangle ourselves from all of the energy that bleeds out and robs us of our vitality. So that prepares us then to begin the process of actual practice of yoga, which is after yama and niyama, there's asana and asana, which is getting comfortable, to be able to sit comfortably. And then there's pranayama, pratyahara, dharma, dhyana, and samadhi. But you can't do those if you don't do the preparatory work.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I would say yoga is a preparation for Tantra. Because if you haven't done those things and learned how to manage your instinctual drives, the food, sex, sleep, and self-preservation, then you're going to be pulled away and not be able to do the deeper practices. So, anyway,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for the question. Anybody else? No? Okay. So should we call it a day? Call it a
Yeah.
night? Whatever.
That's good.
Call it a-
This has been terrific.
Thank you, yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you, David, for hosting.
I'm sure.
Yes, thank you, Dave, for
Lovely energy here.
hosting and letting everybody know how to get here
And leading us in the singing.
and inviting you. Yeah.
Well, everybody, have a wonderful evening.
Yeah,
You know,
You too.
thank you.
yes.
Thank you,
It was
Swami
nice
Ravi,
meeting you all.
Thank you for your offering and for coming out here and
Yes, thank you.
sharing your experience and wisdom.
You're most welcome.
Mhm.
That's what swamis are for.